Here's a letter from somebody who says, I'm really struggling to be present while spending time with my terminally ill friend. She has cancer. She was the main wage earner in her family, husband, 2 kids. Now she's on half pay with an unfinished addition onto her house, and she can't afford to finish it, so her options are limited. She can sell it and downsize to be able to afford the bills. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. She went through a bunch of options that don't matter. You're feeling uncomfortable, the proper word would be afraid, that your friend is suffering on multiple levels, financially, emotionally, physically, and more, and you don't quite know what to do. You want to be able to fix problems that are not yours and that you can't fix. You feel helpless and you hate it, and it scares you. And this is the thing that affects almost everybody who visits people who are seriously terminally ill, have things that you just can't help. Studies have proven that we almost stop visiting people once we learn they're going to die because we don't know what to say or do. So it's lovely that you care about her, but it will burden you and hurt your ability to love her if you take on responsibilities that are not yours. You continue. She's trying, my friend, hard to stay out of fear and be positive, but she isn't doing so well with that right now. So I don't know what to say. I'm glad you asked, because I love talking to people who are terminally ill. You just love her. You hold her hand. You tell her that she's not alone, and you mean it. You just be present with her. You don't treat her like she's terminally ill, like you're walking on eggshells, or you're afraid you're going to break her. You indicate that you understand how hard this is for her, knowing that she's going to be leaving the family behind with a whole lot less than they had before. But the only thing she has in life is right now, this moment. And in this moment, you're there with her. I can't think of a time that I was sitting with somebody who was terminally ill where that didn't make a difference to them. I can't fix you. I can't make your cancer go away, but I can fill your heart with love right now. We can have fun right now. We can play a game of cribbage right now. We can talk about our relationship and how fun it's been to know each other for years right now. And you can tell her that being there is all she can really do for her family. Death is almost certainly coming. But if you think about that all the time now, then you don't have now. All you're thinking about is being dead. Any time spent in frustration or grief is completely understandable. I'm not saying don't, but it just robs her and her family of enjoying now. And it robs you. Everybody loses with frustration and grief and anxiety and all that stuff. You continue. She does not want to feel like a victim, but when she goes into fear for her future and that of her family, I go there with her. And that is one of the biggest things bothering you. And it makes you incapable of helping her. She needs you as an island of calm. She needs you as a rock, not to fix her or save her, but simply to be there with her. Talk about the hard things. What will he do when she dies? How will he earn a living? Does she want to write letters, for example, to leave to him or to the kids to read once a year for X years? Would she like you to write some of those letters? Because by now she probably tires easily. Would she like you to help her make a video for the kids or her husband? You talk to her about what does she want and how does she feel. You make this all about her. The second that you have a look of concern on your face, because I've asked this of many people who are dying, they hate it when people come in the room and have this look of on their face, because as soon as the other person looks concerned, oddly, now the person who's dying has to comfort the person who's not dying. And that really doesn't make their day. So there's a whole lot you can do and say. Here's a lady who writes and says, I've been talking to a lot of other women about a problem that seems to be everywhere, she says in all caps, even among Christian men, which I don't know this woman, but pretty much hints that she must be Christian, or she wouldn't make a special point about referring to Christian men, who I associate with most. It's my experience that women all over are in great pain as they describe this problem. She still hasn't described the problem yet, but she's kind of warming up. They try to get help, but oftentimes they leave their partners because they can't take it anymore. I've had to deal with it in my relationships as well. Here's the problem. A lot of men in relationships look at and check out other women, even young girls in their teens, with no real thought about their girlfriend or their wife's feelings. I've had enough experiencing this kind of man, and I know that not all men are like this. I'm just wanting to understand more. Many women think, like I do, that it's demeaning, disrespectful. This is quite a little run, so hang on here. Quite a vocabulary. That it's demeaning, disrespectful, hateful, unloving, unkind, unpeaceful, unfaithful, not good, disgusting, rude, nerve-wracking, hurtful, deceitful, fearful, and intolerable. Well, don't sugarcoat it. And you're completely right about every one of those words. All those things are true. When men gawk at other women in public, they're having sex with these women in their minds. They really are. Remember, I've been hanging around guys for a long time, and they talk about it. So they really are having sex with these women that they're looking about. And it's all the things that you just said. And it's so common, it's become so commonly accepted that if you tell men, as I have done on many occasions, that it's wrong, most of them don't even know what you're talking about. They can't imagine that you're telling them that it's wrong to do that. In fact, they'll respond with, well, I was just looking. I wasn't touching. Or, well, what's the harm? Or, well, it's just an appreciation of beauty. That last one is one of my favorites. So let's look at these. It's not touching, so what's the harm? So where do you think touching begins? And while you're looking at another woman who's not your partner, where is your focus? Is it on your partner? No. And you think your partner doesn't sense that you're detaching from her, that you don't have a sense of complete loyalty to her? Or my personal favorite, well, it's just an appreciation of beauty. Well, I would buy that if I had ever in my lifetime seen a guy gawk at and fantasize about, say, the architecture of a building. Even the thought of that makes me laugh. Or a painting. No, these are all just excuses. It's about sex. Is it possible not to do this? Yeah, it really is. Now, any man might notice a woman with particularly striking physical features of a broad range for a moment, but the next second is all his decision. We make a choice what thoughts to feed. I'd been married to Donna for a year, and she had known cheating men all of her life. Long list of cheating men, almost without exception. And after a year, she said, okay, you pass. I'm going to quit examining you. What? I didn't know what she was talking about. She said, I've been watching you for a year, and you've never, ever, one time in the entire year, ever diverted your eyes from me or what you were doing to look at another woman. Ever. So clearly it is possible. Why would you do that? It is completely demeaning. It completely objectifies another human being and reduces them to the place of being an object. So we make a choice about the thoughts that we feed. So now, what do you do as a woman? If you have a partner who does this and you put up with it at all, ever, if you ever let a time go by where he looks at another woman and you don't say something, you don't realize you're doing it, but you're giving him permission to do it the next time. Really, not kidding. Remember, I know these guys. So you have to say something every single time. So you don't need to attack him and scream and yell at him and hit him, because that's not going to help. But you can reach over and touch him and say, right while he's looking in the direction of another woman in the mall or wherever you are, do you realize what you're doing right now? And if you buy any excuse on the planet, then you deserve whatever you get. If he says, oh, I wasn't doing anything, don't you even pause. You say, you were. You weren't just looking over in the direction of the women's shoe store. Guys, don't gawk at women's shoe stores. You were looking at that woman over there with whatever prominent feature it is he finds particularly attractive. Or you reach over and touch him and say, you just looked at that woman. Don't ever buy the excuses, because men don't move their heads around randomly. In fact, unless they're distracted by women, or they happen to be looking at the latest snowblower in the hardware shop that they're looking for, you watch men as they're getting from point A to point B. They pretty much don't look to the side at anything. They're all business about getting from one place to another. So if you see a guy, because I've seen it in airports, if you see a guy who you wouldn't think this was physiologically possible, but who turns his head 360 degrees on his shoulders, he's not looking at a really cute dog carrier. He's gawking at a woman. You have to pay attention to that, or you are unwittingly enabling that. New subject. Here's somebody who says, I just spent 2.5 hours with a friend and he's just so angry. It's like we actually connected for the first few minutes, and then he goes into these rants about how people at work and at church and other places are so hypocritical, and how he just hates them, and how it just disgusts him the way people behave. And then he said something to me like this. He said, you know, I feel like we've had this conversation before. And I said, yeah, you do tend to repeat yourself. And he said, well, there's nothing else to really talk about. I mean, like, we can't talk about politics. And so he continues his rant. And I don't know what to do. So, honey, change the subject. He goes on these rants because he doesn't know how to talk about anything meaningful in his life. Well, show him. And that doesn't mean say, I'm going to teach you a lesson in what to talk about. People generally don't like to be delivered lectures. Show him by having one of these conversations. Show him what it's like. Tell him the story of your life. Tell him how much you've learned from real love and how much happier you are. Tell him how much happier you are since you stopped complaining. If that doesn't work, stop him. You got nothing to lose. You're not enjoying your conversations with him. Stop him the instant he starts complaining. Now, on the whole, I tell people, if it's not really your business, don't say anything to other people about their behavior. But if this is a friend, if you care about your friend and he's making his life miserable and the time that you spend together miserable because all he ever does is be angry and complain, well then, what do you got to lose? If you point it out to him and he hates you, well, you're already not enjoying your interactions. You haven't lost anything. So the instant he starts complaining, don't wait till he's got the ball rolling for 5 minutes or you're dead. Right then, say, you've told this story many times. To me, that's just to me. Who knows how many times you've said it to other people. And it's never once, I've been watching you, ever made you happy. So you can tell this story and how you're angry again if you want to, but I choose not to be here while you do it, while you tell the story. I won't participate in your killing yourself, which is what you're doing with this resentment. That's what you say. So notice, you're not telling him what not to do. You're not stopping him from being negative. You're just saying you won't participate in it, and you get to make that choice. You say, in conclusion, you say, sometimes I think I listen to him complain because some company is better than none. Oh, that couldn't be more wrong. By listening to complaining, it does affect you more than you realize. Every negative thought that we let roll around in our head pushes out happy thoughts, pushes out gratitude, pushes out loving. And you're not helping him. So everybody loses. If you talk to him about your life and his complaining, you have an opportunity to learn more about how to genuinely love and teach somebody. You got nothing to lose by trying. New subject. How can I get across to my kids that my answer is the final answer? Today the kids asked for lollipops. Now I'm not too uptight about what they eat anymore, but they had just eaten a couple of treats, and they will till they're dead. I said, no, we've already had this and that and the other thing for treats, and so we can't have lollipops. And they just kept asking and asking, almost as if I wasn't answering. I feel like I have to repeat myself a million times sometimes. This is the norm with kids. Everywhere I go, I see it every day, about lollipops, about staying up too late, about doing homework, about chores, and on and on and on. Kids repeat themselves over and over again. We're going to get to the why in a minute. You say, I don't give in to tantrums. I'm not the mom who gives in at the grocery store, so I have an idea what caused this. Sometimes I'll give them an answer, usually no, and then I'll realize that I reacted too quickly, and I'll change my answer because I realize that maybe I'm being too uptight. I think I need to learn to slow down and think more before I respond, and then I'll just say one answer and mean it. Is there anything else you can think of to help them understand that my answer is final, even if it's an answer that they don't like? Okay, you're brilliant, partly. First, kids only repeat themselves if at certain times it works. Really, they're very, very smart. And kids do not repeatedly do things that don't work. That's why you don't see kids out, repeatedly banging their heads on rocks. It doesn't work. But if something does work, even 1 in 10 times, they will pound you to death with it. Because if it worked 1 in 10 times, well, then all they have to do, they intuitively know the math. I've watched kids do this in the grocery store. They've learned that if they say, mom, 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 10 times, that mom will eventually give in. So what did the mother just teach the child? Just say it 10 times and I'll give in. So they just go through the 10 times. They don't get tired, in case you hadn't noticed, and they just keep at it. They don't repeatedly do things that don't work. Adults are much dumber. Adults will repeat unproductive behaviors until they're dead, like addictions. But my kids, when they were little, almost without exception, never repeated themselves. Why? Because when I gave them an answer, I meant it. So what's the solution to kids who nag or beg? First, think for a second before you answer, so that your answer is a good one. So you don't have to change your mind and look like an idiot, because if you do change your mind, you just taught them that all they have to do is nag and beg, and you'll change your mind. They don't realize you changed your mind because you actually changed your decision. All they hear is that you changed your mind because they repeated the request or the demand. If you do have to change your mind, you say, I was wrong, and then give them the right answer and make it clear that it's not because they repeated themselves. But I'll tell you, that isn't going to work. You really need to give the right answer the first time. Second, teach them something. if the answer is no. So you can't have X because of Y. Here are the reasons. Not on and on. Give them one reason, maybe two. Do not repeat the teaching. So if you say, you can't have that because of this, you kind of create a problem for yourself, because if you give them a reason why no, they're going to argue with your reason. It'll never be good enough. And then they'll ask you again, and they'll say, well, but why? If you repeat the reason, you're dead. They've got you in their web of whys and explanations. You're going to run out of explanations. You're going to end up giving them 50 reasons. The thing is, they never get tired of asking. So they're just going to ask you the 51st time, and you're going to give in. Third, say yes as often as possible. Then your no's are listened to much more easily. I said yes to my kids for just about anything that was even half reasonable. Because then when I said no, they went, oh, well, okay. Dad doesn't just whimsically say no. So if he says no, that's good enough. I almost never had to explain why. Last, if they repeat a request, you do not ever repeat your no. So they ask you for something and you say no. Giving them a why is optional. I explained that. But then they ask you again. If you say no again, you're a fool, because you just taught them a little game to play. Can I? No. Can I? No. Can I? No. They love this game. And then eventually you change your mind and say yes. They actually find it entertaining. Watch a kid's face, in case you wonder if what I'm saying is true. So instead of saying no again, you say, what did I say about that? And you smile as you say it. You're not irritated, because then they're forced to say no. It makes 10 times the impact when they say no as opposed to when you say no, and they quickly get the point. You're not playing their game, and it does become a game. This is from a woman who has had great difficulty getting and keeping jobs. Why? Because she was raised by two neglectful parents in their basement. Not abused, no, just left down there. Not taught, not raised, not guided. She was homeschooled through almost all of her schooling, which really means not schooled, but at home. She was raised in a basement much like a pet. So she would come upstairs to eat, maybe to practice the piano, and then she'd go back down in the basement where she raised herself, because they were busy doing whatever. The father was busy working, the mother was busy doing social functions. She got no social interactions, no love at all, not even the traded kind. Forget unconditional love. She didn't even get imitation love. No parental instruction. She was crippled from an early age, which makes doing anything pretty tough, like especially getting a job. With what skill? She didn't even know how to talk to people. But she has been trying, and recently got a job, and she's had it now for what is pretty close to a record for her. I think she's had it for possibly 10 days. I am not mocking that. That's a very long time for her. In the past, it's fairly common for her to get a job and have it for an hour before she went home because she was tired. So this is thrilling. She said that the other day she ate some food from the freezer in the kitchen in the institution where she works, which of course is stealing. And she correctly identified it as stealing. She asked me what I thought, and I said, your choice entirely, kid. I don't think any less of you. I don't love you less. But you've worked how many months and put in how much preparation to get this job, and you risk everything by eating a piece of whatever, an ice cream treat. You also risk not just your job, but your own integrity and happiness. She responded, I'm starting to see that now. As miserable as I'm doing it, And even knowing it's wrong, I've kept doing it partly because it's an effective distraction from my pain. There's something about wandering into a place that I'm not supposed to be in and taking what is not mine that gives me a brief rush, a feeling of power, a kind of high in the middle of feeling a deep sense of moral conflict and distancing myself from what is right and good and loving. It's sick, and the feeling doesn't last, but it draws me in. Nothing is worth the risk of losing our peace, our happiness, our connection to love, our connection to God. Nothing. And that is why porn, drugs, alcohol, infidelity, anger, and on and on and on are wrong. Not because of some externally imposed set of morals or ethics or values, because they don't work, because they interfere with happiness. Once we get to the point in our lives where we do the right thing because it makes us happy, and where we refuse to do the wrong thing because it will make us unhappy, we've won. We don't need rules anymore. We don't need to be told what to do and what not to do. We don't need to be warned. We don't need to be threatened or intimidated. We'll just do the right thing. It's a higher plane of existence, a higher plane of consciousness. New subject. I talked to a woman who said that she was throwing something away in the trash in her house. And her husband said, "What is that?" She said, "Garbage." He said, I'm going to have to control myself to not burst into laughter. The things that we argue about. He said, "What kind of garbage?" By this point, Donna would be looking at me if I were asking these questions and going, "Do you have a temperature?" He said, "What kind of garbage?" She said, "It's a yogurt cup." He said, "Shouldn't that be recycled?" No, I'm asking everybody who's listening, are you annoyed yet? And you're not even involved. Are you feeling micromanaged? I'm feeling micromanaged and annoyed, and it wasn't me. She said, "Well, it still has yogurt on the sides, so I thought it would fall into the category of old food and should go into the garbage." He said, "Well, you really should wash it out and recycle it." And then she said, and then I got defensive, and I'm thinking, do you think? It's like being told how to walk when you're an adult. So she got defensive, then he got more controlling, and it got worse and worse, as you might guess, and then just sort of blah, blah, blah. Everything that happens after that is blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I hear this kind of thing happening between two people, whether it's two people at work, whether it's a couple, whether it's a parent-child. I hear this kind of thing happening every day. Usually I hear it several times a day. Would the ideal, perfect recycler, the one that gets the recycling award for the community, if there were such a thing, have checked the recycle symbol, which apparently I learned from Donna is on the bottom of every plastic container, have washed out the cup and put it in the recycling? Yes, he's right. It could have been washed out, and it could, notice I didn't say should, have been put in the recycling. And that is why the husband felt justified in controlling his wife. He was right about the recycling. But he was very wrong. He was right about the recycling, but he was dead wrong about the way he treated her. Memorize this. No task, certainly not recycling, but really no task, is as important as loving another person. Nothing. You remember that, you'll stay out of trouble always. Is it okay to ask your partner one time to put recycling in a container different from the trash, if it really matters to you? Sure. Sweetie, I would really appreciate it if You looked into the bottom of the plastic cup, and if it says, in our area, I think there's a 1 or a 2, that goes in the recycling. If the plastic's 3, 4, 5, then it's trash. And Donna didn't tell me for several years that we don't recycle glass. And here I thought I was being a recycling, environmental hero for putting the glass in the recycling. Sure, it's okay to ask your partner to recycle, but to ask more than once is either nagging and controlling, or it's assuming that your partner's stupid. Example of not controlling. Don and I were recently cleaning up the shed, a shed that I think was last cleaned up when I was 12. Filthy. It's the kind of filthy that doesn't bother me. Dust, dirt, leaves. I consider it kind of part of the ambiance. And she thought it would look better if it was cleaned up. So we did. And mostly I moved heavy stuff from one place to another and took stuff to the burn pile. And I must admit, somewhat surprised after taking all of the things that were to be either recycled or taken to the dump, or things that people would pick up, like an old lawnmower, things that people would fix and use. You just put them out in front of your house in our neighborhood, and if somebody wants it, then they just come along and take it. It's kind of like having a garage sale for free. And at the end of the day, I looked out there and it looked like a redneck jungle. I mean, the line went on for easily 50 feet of stuff. Bags and mowers and boxes and stuff. So we did a lot of work. At one point, I started sweeping the floor. I'm not a real careful sweeper, it turns out, because I don't really care. And after a while, she said, why don't I finish the sweeping and you take this load of stuff to the burn pile? Because she knows that I would infinitely prefer to race the ATV to the burn pile than I would sweep stuff. I don't sweep all that well. She says nothing about that. Her standard of sweeping is way higher than mine. Instead, she puts it in a way that, why don't you go ride the ATV? She offers to take the sweeping. I don't recall the last time she's ever said to me, this is the right way to clean, or why don't you do it this way, or this is the way I prefer it. It isn't worth it. There is nothing more important than loving the person that you're talking to. No task is more important than that. Oh my, would that save us trouble. I know a lady in real love who was divorced a few months ago, and she's begun to date. And she wrote and said, I had a few email exchanges with this guy a while back, and he responded with rather lengthy emails. He answered all my questions, and he asked me questions which led me to believe that he was interested. Okay, it's pretty common for people to do that. And sometimes those are the people who mean it, and some of those people don't mean it at all. But it's a beginning. It's just information. Early in the process of dating, that's all you're doing is gathering information. She continues, but it would take days, up to a week, for him to respond to any email that I sent him. That's almost never a good sign. The words people use are far less important than their behavior. So if somebody waits a week to respond to an email, I mean, can you imagine making a phone call to somebody and you ask them a question and they just drop the phone and come back in a week? Nobody would think of doing that. But people do it with their emails all the time and think nothing of it. Why? Because they can get away with it. And then they leave you to figure out what the meaning of not answering in a week is. It's really quite rude. It's a strong indication that he communicates with people only when it's convenient for him. And that's nearly a fatal word for the consideration of a relationship. Him. He's thinking about himself. She continues, I never said anything about that to him, although it did seem contradictory to the idea that he was telling me, which is that he's really interested. So follow, this isn't hard. I'm really interested in you, and I'm so interested that I'm going to take a week without explanation to respond to an email that you send me. If somebody's really interested in you, they get back to you within hours. I pretty much make it up. I tell people straight out, if you don't hear from me within, by the end of the day, the same day that you sent me an email, I didn't get your email, because I don't go to bed without my emails answered. All of them. And I answer a great deal more emails than most people do. And if I'm going to be gone for a day or two, I will tell you that. I'll say, can't answer your email today, I'll get to it later. There. And then I leave it there. And I answer it as soon as I can. So what he's saying and what he's doing are really in contradiction. Always choose the behavior as the truth, not the words. She says, I still don't know how to ask what someone's intentions are, knowing sometimes that they don't know themselves. This is a great dating question that she's asking. Exactly. So listen, again, words mean nothing. Pay attention to their behavior. Delayed responses are a huge piece of information. I've actually had men or women say to me, I wrote to this guy, he hasn't responded, so I don't know what to make of it. Well, when was the last time he responded? 3 months ago. Yeah, well, that would be a pretty much no, go away. That's what that means. She says, I decided to just see how things played out. We had 4 or 5 emails total. I haven't heard from him now in over a month. Honey, he's not interested. Like, as in full stop, period, depends on which side of the Atlantic you're on, whether you say either one. End of discussion. It's all in the behavior. She continues, I wonder what happened, why he stopped emailing. Oh, fatal to wonder. In situations like this where you've had regular communication with somebody and then they stop for an unknown reason, what's the appropriate thing to say? Some options that I considered. I could resend my last email with a note that says, not sure if you got this, so I am resending. That's possible. In all the years that I've been emailing, which has been like from day one that emails were available. No kidding. I had an email account within days of when email existed. I've had an email just simply not be delivered less than 0.01% of the time. That's less than 1 in 10,000 times. I send a lot of emails. They get there. You could try that. Not sure if you got this, so I'm resending it. It happens. I could send him an email, how are you doing? Nah, disingenuous, you're playing games. I could send an email asking him if I said something that offended him. Remember, you two have only exchanged 4 or 5 emails. Why would you care why he didn't respond? All you need to know is he's not interested. She said, or the last one is do nothing. Pretty much the last one. She concludes, I've not thought about him much. Well, there's another clue. I don't feel attached to needing an answer from him. Well, that's not quite true, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. I'm mostly trying to figure out what the appropriate thing is to do, because not getting a response from people is common in various situations, and I don't know yet when to follow up and when not to. Listen to the behavior. Usually, you just let it go. The idea in dating is to gather information and to get to know the word no, as in we ain't going to have a relationship, faster. Oh, how much easier that is than trying to convince somebody to like us. It's a lot of work, and it doesn't end up really being effective in the end anyway. Here's a mother who says, my daughter, Alicia, has been home from college for 3 weeks. She's got 1 more week before she goes back. The day before I picked her up to bring her home 3 weeks ago, I was full of enthusiasm about spending time with her and loving her better. How cool of you. Easy to say, quite another thing to do. You continue, I had a happy few months since Christmas, and I was deluding myself that I was capable of being quite consistently peaceful and loving. I was wrong. Probably. It doesn't make you incapable, though. Doesn't mean you're incapable of loving. It just means that your capacity was exceeded by the stress of the people you were around, the combination of the stress of all the people you were around. You say the solution to just love her and enjoy her lasted for about 3 hours when she got home. I found myself instead getting irritable, mostly at what I perceive as her self-absorption, selfishness, and laziness, all conditions created by me, of course. She's desperately empty, addicted to her phone and to watching things on her laptop. I have found her harder to love again than I hoped. Well, I know her, and she is pretty self-absorbed. It's not just you. She's self-absorbed, and there's an entire generation coming up that a Time magazine cover not long ago called the entitled generation. You say, I've reminded her about the rules of her being at home, not leaving things around the house, not clearing up after herself, walking the dog, and so on. I've been resentful about reminding her, so this has been a mistake. You're right. She's also been resentful about being reminded. Her breaches of these rules, however, have been relatively minor and in themselves just haven't seemed quite serious enough for me to issue the consequence of requiring her to leave and find somewhere else to live. I also know that I have been unloving on occasion to her. Oh, honey, she's really conned you. Or one of my favorite words recently, she has gamed you. It's a game people play. How close to the line can I get of breaking the rules without paying the price? And so they prey upon people like yourself who say, well, but it wasn't that big a violation. And sure, you've made a few mistakes with her, but is there another way that you can do this while you're learning? There is. We'll get to that. You say, when I've been unloving, irritable, I've told her the truth about my mistakes, and that has then created opportunities for more connected conversations with her. Those moments of connection, however, have not been frequent. She feels this, and we've spoken about it, but there's this sense of who is to blame about the lack of connection. She feels it's because I'm unloving and that I judge and disapprove of her and that I'm unreasonable in the requests that I make. I feel she has an attitude of entitlement and also that she puts up barriers to me being able to love her. She doesn't trust me because of how unloving I've been in the past and how unloving I still am on occasion. Yeah, here's the game. She now requires that essentially you be perfect before she'll even consider forgiving you. Perfect for a very long time, which includes doing things her way. As soon as a child defines loving them as giving them everything they want, the child is screwed. And if you buy into that definition, you're screwed too, and you can't have a relationship. She's created conditions that are very nearly impossible to fulfill. So you have to give her everything she wants, not enforce the rules around the house, never make mistakes, be perfectly loving, and then she might forgive you, but she still won't do her jobs. So you can't wait to be perfectly loving before you require that a child keep the rules around the house. You can't. You continue. She doesn't trust me, and I don't blame her for this. There's still a lot of stuff between us. So the most important things that you can do are these, and it's always the same two things for a parent. Love and teach, or if you like, it's one thing, love and teach. You love her without fail as well as you can. Not perfectly, just as well as you can. You do the best you can to never be irritated at her. If you're kind to a child 9 times in a row and you smack them in the face with a shovel the 10th time, they don't average that out. They really don't. They remember the wounds. And then 2, you teach her. When you set rules, you require compliance. What you're doing is kind of suggesting compliance and kind of begging for her compliance, and then, like in your own words, reminding her over and over, oh, no, this is a kid who's at college and you're having to remind her to clean up her room. She can do trigonometry blindfolded, but she has to be reminded to clean up her room, and then says with a straight face, "Oh, I forgot." That's completely absurd. Why do you require it? Because if you don't, she sees you as, now follow, this is fairly subtle. She sees you as weak and unpredictable. And that devalues you in her mind and devalues the love that you do give her. This is all you can do. Love and teach her. And then it will take her as long as it takes to get over herself. But if you don't do both 1 and 2 consistently, she has no gravity in her world. And without your consistency, she lives in a world of chaos where she's perpetually confused and believes that she's the creator of her world, which can only hurt her. If you don't enforce the consequence that she has to move out, you need to give her a warning. You need to say, all right, you really haven't kept up your job. And so the next time that you break any one of these rules or don't do any one of these responsibilities, if a kid is told, if you fail to turn in one more homework assignment, we're going to fail you from the university. They're not joking. And it turns out that the kid does the homework assignment and graduates from the university. They know that the university is not kidding. Well, why should you have different consequences? So you tell her, the next time you do this, you will have to move out within 24 hours. Oh, I don't have any place to go. Oh, you're the one that were telling me that you have friends all over the place and that they would love to have you live with them, so this will give you a chance. And if you don't do your responsibilities again, then you are declaring that you want to move out and live with your friends, not me. You continue. It feels like I find my younger daughter, Janine, easier to love. I've got less fear myself around her than I have around my daughter, Alicia. She's less attacking and needing to be right than Alicia, and Janine is more frequently open to being loved. Alicia sees and feels the difference, which increases her pain, I think. In other words, she sees the difference in how I love Janine versus her. And I feel frustrated that I'm not able to love her better. Most of the time, I'm not even sure what it looks like. The biggest difference that you feel with your older daughter, Alicia, is not her, which is only a version of the blaming that she does toward you. The difference is your fear. And you did admit to that. You have to be fearless. You're more afraid of your older daughter because she just knifes you with that disapproval. You have to be fearless and apply consequences almost while you're laughing, or you are ruled out as somebody whose love doesn't even matter. And it's important that you get this. You say, my dilemma is about the next college holiday, which is 3 months over the summer. Same rules, love and teach. She breaks the rules, she gets one warning, and then she's out for the summer. If you keep giving her breaks, you are teaching her that the world owes her whatever she wants. You talk about the breaks in her not keeping the rules as being minor. Oh no, there are no minor breaks. She's toying with you. The police don't allow you to hit other cars mildly as you drive. Well, I didn't cause that much damage. I wasn't that much over the alcohol limit. No, if you're over the limit at all, 0.01 over, then you go to jail. She knows this about the law, but she knows with you, she has leeway, so she takes it. So you've really got to get clear whether you're willing to live with the consequences of this girl's displeasure by enforcing the rules in your home. If you don't, you enable her and you hurt her. This is the biggest single mistake parents make, is that they're afraid of their children's disapproval. Here's a lady who says, I was asked to teach a lesson in Sunday school at my church. A couple of days before I was to give the lesson, I gave the written lesson to my husband, Michael. A day later, I asked him if he'd read it. He said, some of it. he really hates it that I'm Christian and that I go to church. Now, I know him. So I can say some things that those of you who are listening might not know. And so if you wonder how I know these things, it's because I know him. It's not really with him about church or God. It's about the fact that when he doesn't feel safe, he retreats into his head, where he's all alone and superior, but also miserable. And he hates it that you're happy doing what you're doing. Christian or not, Christian, Muslim, he doesn't care. You're happy doing something that doesn't involve your head, and he cannot understand that. And it bugs him. It bugs him that you have a sense of connection that he doesn't have. He doesn't have a single close friend. And he often demonstrates and actually says that he feels alone. And then he uses the church that you go to as an excuse to justify the distance that occasionally develops between you. So he uses the church as a source of ridicule. He uses it as an excuse to be annoyed at you. He uses it to blame when the two of you are distant. He's really being pretty irresponsible about this. And at some point, you're going to need to let him know this. And he loves to ridicule your faith so that you quit doing this thing that he blames for separating you. His pride is enormous. He loves to be right. He also mocks your faith because he gets a sense of superiority from his intellectualization of everything. He lives in his head. He knows you can't argue the existence of God intellectually. So he feels superior. He gets his whole sense of identity from being right and arguing, which is an incredibly lonely way to live. You say he doesn't know why he's unhappy, so he keeps going back to blaming the church or picking on the church. I guess he has to blame something. Beautiful, my dear. You're seeing this. It's beautiful that you see this and that you're seeing it without being bitter. He said something like, now mind you, those of you who are listening, all she did was give him a lesson that she'd written. She wasn't asking him about his opinion about Christianity or whether she was a Christian. She just said, would you read this material? He said something like, now I'm not saying it's right, but I feel more distant from you when you do all these church things. See, she wasn't asking for him for an opinion about her involvement with church. She was saying, would you read this? So he uses every opportunity to attack her about her faith. She says, I told him that going to church events like this actually make me feel closer to him. I said that I always look forward to seeing him again when I get back from church and that I feel blessed for being able to share life with him. And he smiled and said, well, that's good for you, I guess, but it doesn't help me. He's just not listening. He so wants to not feel alone, but he's clueless what to do. He'd have to be vulnerable to other people, to God, to anybody, and he just won't do that. And it's frustrating him. He needs to learn, as we all do, and you may not be the person to teach it to him, and he may not be ready to hear it. He needs to learn that we have to find love. We have to trust love. We can't find or trust love unless we're first vulnerable and open, and that's what he won't do. Then we need to remember the love that we have. You're doing all of these things, and then share it with other people. He's doing none of these things and wonders why he's happy. You're wonders why he's not happy. You're doing all of them, and it just mystifies him that you're so happy when you're not doing something intellectual, which is where he finds all of his pleasure, but certainly not happiness. We all need to do the same thing. Find it, trust it, remember it, and share it. Happiness is a guarantee. We'll see you in a week.